Welcome everybody to our Chocolatey Software Product Spotlight live stream for July. Today we're going to look at the recent release of Chocolatey CLI, Chocolatey GUI, Chocolatey Agent, and also Chocolatey Licensed Extension. We run 2 live streams every month, and the first and third Thursday, this live stream is where we spotlight Chocolatey products, recent releases, and important features. Another live stream on the third Thursday of each month is our Chocolatey Community Coffee Break, where we talk to members of the Chocolatey community, discuss how you can get involved and recent changes. The next Chocolatey Community live stream is on the 20th of July at 4 p.m. UTC. You can watch out for announcements of all of our Chocolatey content by joining us on Discord, subscribing to us on YouTube, or following us on Twitter, Mastodon, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitch. We're on all the things. You can also find those links at the bottom of our homepage, chocolatey.org. My name is Paul Broadith. I'm a technical engineering manager here at Chocolatey Software, and I lead the engineering team that is responsible for the products we'll be talking about today. My co-host today is Gary Ewan-Park. I should say my co-host today and always is Gary Ewan-Park, who'll be taking us through the technical aspects today, including the demos. Gary, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, I can do that. My name is Gary Ewan-Park. I am a principal software engineer here at Chocolatey Software, and I work with the team to release all the bits. So yeah, happy to talk to you about the recent release of Chocolatey CLI. And one thing I will say though is I have been having internet issues, let's put it that way, of late, to the point that I have literally no wired connection to the internet anymore, in the process of getting my broadband upgraded. So I am currently tethered to a 4G MiFi device. So if I start breaking up or get disconnected, I can only apologize in advance. It's just the way it goes.
I have a couple of songs I can sing. Well, if you're disconnected, we'll have a sing song. Yeah, we'll just make the time up while you're away. Thanks, Gary. The 2.0.0 release of the Chocolatey products back at the end of May was a huge change to the internals of the Chocolatey products. And as is kind of expected with any major change, no matter how much testing you do, bugs are always going to surface. So we recently released a 2.1.0 version of some of our products to fix those bugs and introduce some new features to help. And that's what we're going to be looking at today. So Gary's going to take us through that. He's going to take us through the release notes. He's going to take us through some demos and show some features. And we're going to kind of highlight some of, or a few of the particular areas that we want to talk about today. Gary, I know you've put your camera off. I hope you've not disappeared. And you scared me there. Don't scare me, Gary.
I haven't. No, I am still here. But I'm preempting for when I do start sharing my screen, just to save on the old outgoing bandwidth. I will probably drop my video, so it'll just be the share and me talking. So you'll just imagine me sitting here in the camera and making lots of arm movements as I try to explain things.
Okay.
So I'm ready to go. If you're
okay, I'm ready for you to go, Gary. So
beautiful. Right. So okay. I'll drop my camera then, and I will share my screen. So if I do this one and this one, and
it's like we rehearsed this.
Are able to see my screen? That would be good.
Yes, can see it now.
Okay, cool. Okay, so as Paul said, we released 2.0.0 and 6.0.0 of Chocolatey CLI and Chocolatey Licensed Extension, and then 2.0 release of the other Chocolatey products. Quite quickly, out of the bat, there was some issues reported. So what we did is we took some time to collect all of those issues and figure out what we needed to fix going into the next release. And then we established what that catalog, that backlog of items was going to be. And the end result is a new 2.1.0 release of Chocolatey CLI. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through some of those just now. So I've got the release notes in behind me here. I'm just going to work through, not in any particular order, but we will be concentrating on some of the items more than others because they're more important. But I'll just go through them in the order that they come in the release notes. So the first thing, there was quite a few bug fixes in this release, and also some improvements, and one change to the documentation just to make it clearer on a couple of items. So looking at the bug fixes, the first one here, which I'm not really going to spend too much time on, is a warning about a threshold not shown for multiple sources. So what this one is referring to, if you click through to the issue, because we do tend to always try to link through to the open source issue if there is one for a particular GitHub issue, or open source issue, or license issue if there is one. So this one was about a warning if you have multiple sources when you do a Choco search, then we do limit the amount of packages that are returned from any particular search. The reason we do that is because once you get past, say, 1,000 packages, you're not going to find what you're looking for if there's over 1,000 packages. So what we would encourage you to do is refine that search using some of the filtering options on the Chocolatey CLI. So what we do when there is more than, say, 1,000 packages, I think that's the right number, we will provide a warning that's saying that you're getting close to that threshold. But that warning wasn't being shown when there was multiple sources involved or configured on your machine. So we fixed that issue. The second one I want to chat about, because, well, one of our team members, Corey, spent a long time digging into this, so it would be remiss of me to not mention it in detail. System proxy settings and the automatic detection of settings is no longer used in v2.0. So this one was a slightly annoying bug, and I say that because Corey and the team spent a lot of time making sure that proxies worked everywhere that we could think that they could work. So that meant accepting proxy command line options when you're running a command, setting proxy settings via Chocolate config file options, setting proxy settings via environment variables, setting proxy settings via system settings. And from all of the testing that we did, all of that just worked. But then we got a couple of issues saying that people's proxies weren't working. So what we quite quickly found out was that there was yet another way that you can configure a proxy that wasn't via any of those things. And for want of a better word, because I don't fully understand proxies, and I'm happy to admit that, it worked by magic, right? So there was this system setting that just magically created a proxy. And in some scenarios, some applications just pick it up automatically. And unfortunately, in the 2.0 release of Choco.exe, it didn't work. So Corey dug in, figured out what the problem was, and we're happy to say that those proxy issues are now resolved. So we've added that into our testing so that going forward, we won't have any, or we hopefully won't have any more regressions in and around that area. But if you do continue to see any proxy settings problems, I know a man that can fix it because he's so knee deep in proxies now, he knows how to fix everything, right? And he'll thank me for saying that, I'm sure he will. The next bug fix was incorrect implementation of the rule ID equality comparer .equals method. I'm not even going to say any more than that because that rule ID equality operator is not being used anywhere in Chocolatey at the minute. It was just something that was put in play for some future work that's coming down the pipeline. And in that, it was pointed out by a community contributor that there was an implementation of the equals method that wasn't quite right. It had never come up in our testing because nothing uses it right now. So we took the opportunity while we were doing this release to fix that before going forward. The next fix, Choco pin remove dash name, package name, removes a pin for a different package. I've got no words to say on this one, other than it was a mistake and we have addressed it. What this was essentially saying was, if you had two packages that were maybe quite close in name, then there was a potential for the remove of a pin, so Choco pin remove, to find a different package other than the one that you had asked for the pin to be removed on. So what we had to do there is we had to make the Choco pin remove much more specific about the actual package name that it was a way to remove, essentially doing a -- exact on the package ID in order to remove it from the correct package. It was a community contribution, identified the bug and gave us a set of very easy to follow steps to reproduce. And from that, we were able to fix it. So I'm happy that that much got resolved. I'm going to leave this one and come back to it because there's more to talk about in the package version normalization. So I'll come back to that at the end. Chocolatey CLI tries to load license environment settings when a license extension assembly is not supposed to be loaded. Quite a few words in that one, but essentially what that was saying is when you're using both Chocolatey CLI and Chocolatey license extension, we do quite a bit of work in terms of making sure that the version of each of those things that are currently being run work together. And if they don't work together, we'll provide warnings and we won't load the license extension when we're not meant to. Now, it was found that there was a scenario where it would attempt to do something with the license extension when it wasn't meant to. So even though it output a warning saying it wasn't going to be loaded, some things within that extension were attempted to be loaded in the last release. So we've addressed that, and those errors that we're showing should no longer show anymore. It should just be the warning output that says these two installed binaries don't work together. Okay. The next one, initial chocolatey.config file is initialized with empty descriptions. I'm going to put my hand up and say that this was completely my fault. So apologies on this one. I broke it. It's what it comes down to. In the 2.0 release of Chocolatey CLI, we made a decision to remove some deprecated commands or deprecated options from the chocolatey.config file. But in doing that, I removed the initialization of the two properties from the location where they do exist in the chocolatey.config file. Now that didn't quote unquote stop anything from working until we come to the next bug, but it didn't stop anything from working because you could still set the values. It's just that those values were promptly ignored because of the next bug. So I've got no real excuse as to what was done and why, but it was an oversight. We fixed it. Where this surfaced was that even though you had maybe set Choco config, set cache location to some known folder location you wanted all the cached items to reside in, that wasn't being respected. So the config would be set. So say you wanted to use C temp choco cache folder as your cache location, it would be set and it would be stored in the chocolatey.config file, but it wouldn't be respected by any chocolatey commands that made use of that. And those two bugs were very much intertwined. Because we weren't setting the config, it wasn't being initialized correctly, and therefore it wasn't being picked up as being there is a value to be used. So it didn't stop anything from working. It just meant that your cache location was not being respected correctly. And where this actually surfaced was in Chocolatey GUI, because Chocolatey GUI attempts to do some translation of the descriptions that are stored for each configuration item. And because of the empty description, it actually bubbled up as an exception. An exception was thrown when it attempted to use those. So that was those ones. The next bug was a community contribution, again, with some detailed steps as to how what the problem here was. But essentially, we made some changes to the tab expansion PowerShell script. So that's the PowerShell script that allows you to type Choco and then hit space and then do INS and hit tab, and it'll automatically complete the install command and then automatic completion of any command line options that go with that command as well. We made some changes to that tab expansion to be cleverer or more clear on what options were available when you were using open source compared to license extension. But in doing that, when there was an exception or an error thrown, it was surfacing that error outside of the script, which was therefore causing other people problems if they were in a scripting environment where they wanted to ignore any errors, or they didn't want those errors from the tab expansion polluting the PowerShell session that they're currently using. So again, it was a community contribution in the sense that the issue was located with some ideas as to how to move forward with making that better. So happy to see that coming through and happy to get that fixed as well. The one I want to go back to is package version normalization is not being applied everywhere. Now, the reason I want to leave this to the end is because there are some there's lots to talk about here, right? Now, in the 2.0.0 release of Chocolatey, we did a breaking change, which was to introduce package version normalization. So as a quick recap of what that means, let me see if I can open up Notepad and make the, so if you've got a version number like 1.2.3, let me just maybe make this a little bit bigger so that we can control plus might flow through the VM. It does. So 1.2.3 is a semantic version number, right? But certain applications have a non-semantic version number, but it's still a three-part version number. So what I mean by that is you might have something that's got 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3. Now, strictly speaking, that's not a semantic version number, and therefore it's not a normalized version number. So what Chocolatey does now within 2.0 is it will normalize this by removing the leading 0 from those individual version parts, and it will truncate it to just 1.2.3. In the same way that if you've got a version number that is just 1.2, then Chocolatey will augment that with 1.2.0. Now, there's lots of reasons we did that. We kind of covered that in the last video. But what we didn't do is we didn't do that normalization everywhere. So what we had to do within the 2.1.0 release of Chocolatey is to make sure that we add that version normalization to all the locations that it needs to be in. So strictly speaking, some of the changes that are in this issue are quote unquote a breaking change, but we've marked it as a bug fix. But the reason we've done it as a bug fix is because the break has already happened. The break was introduced in the 2.0 release of Chocolatey, and the changes that have been added into this bug fix are really associated with that original break. The fact that some package version normalization wasn't being applied is a bug, and we fixed it here in this release, but we haven't done it as another breaking change because it was intended to have been done in the 2.0 release. So I hope that makes sense. Where you might see this, I don't know if you wanted to speak about this, Paul, but the environment variable for the package, Chocolatey package version, or whether we'll cover that later, or do we cover that here now?
Sorry, I was looking for the mute button there. It might be worthwhile covering it now, Gary, just because it's related to this. Okay, so there within Chocolatey, when Chocolatey executes and it establishes the PowerShell host for executing PowerShell, what Chocolatey does is it introduces a number of environment variables, and those environment variables are intended sometimes to be used within that script for figuring out pieces of information. So whether it's the Chocolatey package name, whether it's what operating system it's running on, whether certain features are enabled, and what package version is being installed. So sometimes some maintainers have made use of the environment variable that is the Chocolatey package version, and they use that in order to maybe concatenate the URL for where an application installer is being downloaded from. The issue that we've introduced with this, and this is why it's come up in a couple of issues, is that because of that package version normalization now being applied, the URL that is concatenated together doesn't work anymore, because where we might have had a version number that was something 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 /1.2 /installer.exe, when Chocolatey executes, that's now 1.2.0 /installer.exe, and therefore the URL doesn't download correctly. Because what someone has put in here, and someone being a maintainer, is something like the Chocolatey package version. So technically, again, this is why I made it before, technically that is a breaking change, but the change should have been introduced in the 2.0 release, and we've treated that as a bug going into the 2.1.0 release. Now, the need or the desire to use this, although it seems initially compelling, it actually already would have been broken. And what I mean by that is, if I, as a maintainer, created a new version of the package because there was something wrong with the packaging, I would have been, quote unquote, instructed or guided to use this sort of nomenclature, which we refer to as the package fix notation. So in fixing the package with a package fix notation, I would actually already have been broken
for that installer download URL. So the guidance going forward for package maintainers will be, don't use the Chocolatey package version when concatenating your URLs for your application installer downloads. Rather, put in the actual URL. So I think with what we've decided is that we're not going to make that a hard rule, i.e. we're not going to fail a package version going through moderation if we see it being used, but we will be putting it through as a guideline that says it's probably not a good idea to use the package version, Chocolatey package version environment variable when you're concatenating a URL. If all you're doing within your script is something like write host, installing version env Chocolatey package version, that's fine, right? Aside from the typos and things that I can't spell properly, that's fine. That sort of thing within your package is fine. But if you're making use of this environment variable for the purposes of concatenating the URL together, we would advise against it, okay? The other reason that this came up is from a license perspective. Chocolatey, the package cacher, which is the license feature, which is our CDN of application installers, it was suffering from the same issue because it would go and try and find a URL that no longer exists in our CDN cache. So we've implemented some changes to ensure that that works going forward, but it also highlighted the fact that anyone using the Chocolatey package version environment variable would suffer from the same problem. So again, guidance is to not use it unless it's something like a write host or some other non-critical item within your script. Did that cover everything there, Paul? I think it did.
Yeah, we've also created a couple of new words there, Gary. I really like installating. I think you should keep that. I think you should keep that.
I'm going to fix it now that you said it. I won't be able to.
No, it does cover that. And just to be clear as well, we've only recently started talking about this. So going forward, what we're going to do is create some documentation, because I think we have to make sure we educate in this and let maintainers know about the kind of changes that we're suggesting. And while we're kind of putting that documentation together, we have to provide examples and why you would want to do it this way and do it another way somewhere else, etc. So there's what we call kind of documentation and education needed for this.
Yeah. Okay, so that was all the bug fixes that I want to cover. So moving on to the improvements, the first one there is create a PowerShell helper function to read config values. So what's this? So this was a community contribution from the Cake is a Lie. So the reason for this new helper function, which is simply get-chococonfig, I think is the, in fact, I should be able to find it in the helpers. If I scroll down to here and do package creation, PowerShell reference, and then get Chocolatey config value, sorry, I clicked on the wrong one, this one. This helper function is intended for use for getting Chocolatey config files values from the chocolatey.config file. So that chocolatey.config file resides in the C program data chocolatey config folder. So I can drill down into here and show, so chocolatey and then config. So the items within this file can now be accessed via this get-chocolatey config value commandlet. So why is this needed? Because you could absolutely, it's just a text file. You could absolutely go in there and find it yourself, but we wanted to provide a supported way of getting the value out of that Chocolatey config file, because it's becoming more important to be able to have those values within your script. So in a previous version of Chocolatey, we introduced the concept of hook packages. Those are packages that can execute before or after the installation of a package, or before or after the installation of all packages. But there's a need there for being able to control how that hook package works, and that is intended to be done via setting of a Chocolatey config file value. So with the using the Choco config, I'll get there, Choco config set command, you can say something like name my hook package, seriously, my hook package value. And then you could give that a dash value, which is equal to Bob, right? So within your hook script, you might make a decision of what to do based on the presence of this my hook package value. So by allowing the setting of a config value and then the reading of a config value via this new helper method, it means that a hook package can make informed decisions about what action needs to be taken. So the prime example of that would be, say, we've currently got an alpha version of a hook package that tidies up desktop shortcuts. You might want to add, or the maintainer of that hook package might want to make some options available for when desktop shortcuts are created or deleted. Might want to make decisions about whether a shared desktop shortcut on all users' desktops is okay, but on my own desktop is not okay. So by providing the ability to read the config file within that hook package, it means that that hook package can take informed decisions based on configuration set by the current user of that machine. So that's what that one's all about. So it was good to see that getting in, because that's been sitting as an open PR as a community contribution for a little bit. So it was good to pull that into this release. I've lost my position on my release notes, so I'll just jump back up. So the next one is add a command to allow purging of cached HTTP queries. Now, this improvement is very much intertwined with this one at the bottom here, so we'll talk about both at the same time. So within the latest version, so within the 2.x version of Chocolatey, we via the usage of the NuGet client assemblies make fairly extensive use of cached HTTP queries. So rather than having to go out to sources each and every single time we need to make a call, we'll use the cached values that are on disk rather than reaching out to the internet all the time. That's just better for everyone. It's a speed improvement, it's a performance improvement, etc. What we found was that in the 2.0.0 release, we had added the caching of queries for the install command, the upgrade command, the outdated command, etc., but we hadn't added it in for the search command. So every time you run Choco search, it would always reach out to the internet to find out what packages are available. We now added it so that Choco search does reach out to the internet when it needs to, but it will also make use of the cache values now as well on disk. So why am I telling you all of that? I'm telling you all of that because once we introduced the caching of the HTTP queries to the search command, we then needed to provide a mechanism to clear the cache, because there are times when you might not want to use the cache values on disk, you want to make a fresh request. So what I can show you there is, if I go up here and run Choco cache list, the Choco cache is the new command, but it has a couple of sub commands, one of which is list. So here what it's telling me is that I have two cache sources. So by that, I mean, it means I've got cache results from both the Choco CCR and from Choco license feed, because I've got two sources configured on my machine. I've got both the Chocolatey CCR and I've got the Chocolatey license feed because I've got the licensed version of Chocolatey installed. So
Gary,
it's found.
I was just going to say, can we clear up what CCR is?
CCR, yes, we can. So CCR is what I refer to as the correct way of saying Chocolatey Community Repository, much like the correct way to say Nupkeg is Nupkeg. So CCR is the Chocolatey Community Repository. It's just easier to say that.
Any opportunity to say Nupkeg.
Indeed, right? So there are two cache sources, one for CCR and one for the Chocolatey license feed. And within those cache sources, there are 24 cached items. So I've done some Chocolatey commands and it's saved some of that information into that folder. And then it's telling me, so that's at the system level. So I can actually look at that. So if I go up to the C program data Chocolatey, sorry, one more, C program data, there's a new Chocolatey HTTP cache. So these are the two sources. So there's one for CCR and there's one for Chocolatey license. I don't know which one's which because they are some random GUI assigned to the feed. I can't see it. That's the CCR one, and that is the license feed. And if I were to go into there, I would see some other results. So these are the query results that have been made by Chocolatey CLI and have been cached on disk. So if the CLI were to make the same query again, it would use the results stored in these files rather than reaching out to the internet. Now, the Choco cache list command is also telling me about a user HTTP cache. That's because Chocolatey can be both run in an administrative context and as a non-administrator at the user level. But it's also telling me that I don't have a directory that is the .chocolatey folder with its HTTP cache folder. That's because I haven't run Chocolatey as a non-administrator user on this machine. But the Choco cache list command tells me about all the caches that I, as an administrator, have access to. If I run this Choco cache list command as a non-administrator user, I would only see this one because I don't have access to this one because I can't do anything about it. So why am I telling you all of this? Well, obviously, there's a Choco cache remove. That's not remove. That's not remove either. There's a Choco cache remove subcommand that will clear up all of those files. Now, you could arguably have come in here and removed all of these files by yourself, but that's work, knowing where those files are, etc. So the Choco cache remove command is now intended to be used to clear those files up. There is a command line option which allows you to only clear up. So if I do Choco cache remove, there is a -- expired option that would only clear up any cached items that have expired past the expiration date of the cache. So depending on what your use case is, you may want to just clean up the expired ones and not the current recent ones. But the options there for how you want to run it. Okay. So that new command is great. So if I were to say do Choco outdated, then it would rerun those queries and I would see those items getting populated again. So behind me here, it's repopulated those because it's now reached out to the internet and it's found those things. So if I run Choco cache remove, just to illustrate the point, it will remove those items again and they'll be deleted. So if I run a slightly different command, which is measure command, and I run Choco outdated, then I will see that command. I have very few packages on this machine. I only have 2 sources available. So the difference in speed is not going to be as noticeable as it normally would be. But that command took 4.5 seconds to complete. If I run the same command again with those cache files on disk, it should be quicker. So there was a 0.7 of a second difference. So rather than having to reach out to the internet, it's rehydrated all of those cache queries from disk rather than reaching out. But if I had many more packages and many more sources, then there would be a noticeable difference between the Choco outdated with the cache and Choco outdated without the cache. The other thing that you can now do, if you wanted to, is you could run Choco outdated, which would use the cache values, but for any given command, you can also say HTTP, ignore HTTP cache option. So that will run that command, but even though there are cache files on disk, it won't use them. So if you wanted to be sure that you were getting the most recent results and you didn't want to run Choco cache clear or Choco cache remove for reasons, you could use the -- ignore HTTP cache option, which is available on all Chocolatey commands. Okay, so that was the add command to allow purging of the cached HTTP queries, and we spoke around this one, which is why we needed that command to be added. We also spoke around this one, which is the introduction of the -- ignore HTTP query, HTTP cache option. And the final one here is the degraded performance after upgrading to Chocolatey version 2.0. So I've left this one to the end because it wasn't my favorite one to look into, but if you were to go and look at this issue and dig into the details of it, then our community friend, Manfred, created an issue where he has provided some examples of using Chocolatey outdated, and in Chocolatey CLI 2.0, it took 97 seconds to complete, and in Chocolatey CLI 1.4, it took less than 3 seconds to complete. So there's a noticeable difference there. So there was a bug, right? We had to dig in to figure out what was going on. So in digging into this, what we found is that our implementation of the NuGet client libraries was actually imposing a 1 second delay into an HTTP retry handler that exists within the NuGet client libraries. So as a result, when you have multiple packages installed, so I think Manfred on this machine had, I think he told us how many packages he had. No, so he did. So it was 4 sources and 20 packages. So that doubles up to 80. So that multiplies together to be 80. So every time it made a request, there was a 1 second delay imposed on that command. So 4 times 20 is 80. Normal execution of Chocolatey, as well as it being slightly more than 1 second to actually complete the request. You can see how quite quickly you can get up to 97 seconds for the choco outdated command to complete. And it simply put, it wasn't good. So we spent quite a bit of time digging into how we can fix this to get Chocolatey back to pre-Chocolatey CLI 2.0 speeds. So we were able to do that. But in this conversation with Manfred, it's also highlighted that there are potential other optimizations that can be made within the choco outdated command. So we didn't do that as part of this release. That's something we're going to look at in future versions of Chocolatey CLI. But for now, what we can say is that the execution or the performance of Chocolatey for commands like the choco outdated command are back to pre 2.0 speeds. There's at least one area that isn't at the same speed of where we were in 1.4. There is an open issue for that, as well as a PR from a community member to help get us back to there, but that wasn't included within this release. This one was just about the overall performance improvement or performance degradations as a result of that 1 second retry handler that was being used within the NuGet client libraries that we are making use of. And with that, I think the documentation, this one was just, this I think is a PR that you created, Paul, where we were just making a slight change to the documentation to make it clearer about expectations, I think, for certain things. I forget the exact thing that was done, but it was a documentation change, so it wasn't. It wouldn't have impacted in your day-to-day usage of Chocolatey. It was more, this is how we do things, and this is what we're looking for. So with that, I think that was everything that we were going to talk about, unless I've missed something.
Was there any changes that we should really highlight for the other products? I know a lot of the changes are really to bring it in line with Chocolatey CLI, but I was thinking Chocolatey GUI. Excuse me. Was there anything
briefly
that we should highlight?
Briefly touched on one of the things that did go out with Chocolatey GUI, and that was quote unquote fixed by the change in Chocolatey CLI. But let's just go through, and I am scrolling on my mouse, but it's really slow, so I'm assuming I might be having internet issues.
I think so.
So there was a couple of bug fixes and one improvement going into Chocolatey GUI. So the bug fix was with the related to the package version normalization not being applied everywhere. So that's the same changes that were made in Chocolatey CLI also had to be introduced in the GUI to ensure that we were showing the normalized version number in all the places that we needed to be. So they were very much intertwined. The second bug fix was null referencing exception is thrown when accessing Chocolatey GUI settings screen. So that was the bug that was introduced because of the Chocolatey config file not being correctly instantiated with the descriptions for those configs. But it was still a bug in Chocolatey GUI because we were attempting to translate something that was essentially a null value. So we made a point of ensuring to not attempt to translate something when there was nothing there to translate. So the bug was still a valid bug in Chocolatey GUI, and we fixed that now, but it was quote unquote fixed by the change that was made in Chocolatey CLI, at least for the built-in Chocolatey config values. If you did create your own Chocolatey config value, you would have still seen the null reference exception. So the change in GUI was still a necessary one. And the second, or the other, and the improvement that we've added in the Chocolatey GUI is we provided the ability to use that new skipped HTTP cache option. So I think I could show you that. So if I were to go to Chocolatey GUI and open that up, so within the install advanced dialog that you can run with Chocolatey GUI, you've now got the option of using that skip HTTP cache command line option. So again, if you wanted to, for a particular reason, ensure that you're always getting the latest version, if I were to go in here and say details and click on install advanced, and down in the advanced options section, right beside the cache location, the cache location option, there is now an ignore HTTP cache, which is off by default, but you can turn it on if you need to. Now that has been introduced in a non-backwards, that has been introduced in a non-backward, what am I trying to say? It's been introduced in a way that it won't break, right? So if you've got the new version of Chocolatey GUI installed, but you've still got the old version of Chocolatey CLI, then this option will not appear. But if you've got the new version of Chocolatey CLI and the new version of Chocolatey GUI, which is what I've got here, the option will appear. But you don't have to update Chocolatey CLI if you don't want to for some reason, but you only want to update the GUI. But this option will only appear when you have the most recent version of both installed. Okay. And I forgot what other products we released at the same time, Paul. So what other products did we release?
Chocolatey licensed extension and Chocolatey agent as well.
We did all four, did we? Okay, so Chocolatey license extension.
We're coming up to time as well, Gary. So it's, I mean, if the issues that have been fixed are very similar to Chocolatey CLI, we can skip over.
I think they are. So we'll just quickly rattle through them. So from a Chocolatey license extension point of view, we released a 6.1.0 version. So again, we've introduced that package version normalization everywhere. There was an issue with the Choco download command, specifically when you were internalizing packages, which would mean that if you had the same package on two different sources and you chose to download from, say, the Chocolatey community repository first, but you had an internalized version of it on an internal repository, the download command wouldn't respect that it was two different package versions, and it could cause problems. So we fixed that in this release. And it's kind of related to this one, which was attempting to reinstall an embedded package that actually contains the application installers can result in failure. The issue there was related to the fact that if you install a package that's got an embedded package, an embedded application installer, I should say, Chocolatey does a cleanup. It attempts to clean up after itself and leave only the necessary files on disk. The issue there, though, was if you attempted to reinstall that package, it wouldn't realize that it no longer was missing application installers, and it would fail to install. So we fixed that by ensuring that all of the packages get placed on disk when they need to as part of an install or a reinstall. This one, invalid URI format showing when running Chocolatey CLI command using some Chocolatey license extension command line options. What was that about? There was an issue where I don't actually recall the issue was that within NuGet client, when we passed sources, information about the sources down, the URI was actually empty when it wasn't meant to. And it's starting to come back to me what this was. So within Chocolatey CLI, there is the concept of using a name of a source. So you can do choco install windows -- source Chocolatey. And under the hood, Chocolatey will take that name of the source and expand it to the actual URI of the source. But what was happening was that when you ran certain Chocolatey license commands, the expansion was being overwritten by some of the other work that was being done in Chocolatey license extension. So as a result, when we pass the source, when we thought we were passing the source URL down into Chocolatey NuGet client, we weren't. We were still passing the name of the source. And as a result, it wasn't able to establish a connection to that source because it was a name rather than a URL. So we fixed that as well. The improvements are very similar to the Chocolatey CLI, where we have fixed the degraded performance that was happening on certain of the license commands. And it was the same problem where NuGet client was introducing a 1 second retry logic. And the final one here is, I kind of alluded to this earlier, and this is related to the package version normalization. We've introduced the concept of falling back to the original application installer URL when we can't communicate with the CDN, that is the Chocolatey CDN. So if for some reason there's an issue with the CDN, not just the fact that it's trying to use the wrong package version for the URL, if there's some outage with the CDN, if it's unable to communicate with the CDN, it will then fall back to the original application installer URL. Now, at that point, there's no guarantee that that will still exist because some vendors don't keep their old package versions around on their own servers. So there's no guarantee that it will function, but we will fall back when something isn't working right with our CDN, which we hope obviously doesn't happen, but these things do happen. And then quickly for the Chocolatey agent, we did a 2.1 release of Chocolatey agent, and it was to do with, we'll come back to that one. The improvement was the improvement within agent is to make use of that same option where we can ignore the HTTP cache. And that's important for getting the most up-to-date results into, say, Chocolatey Central Management, CCM, when agent is reporting in. But what we did find was that there was a bug within agent when it came to reporting of outdated packages into Chocolatey Central Management. The reason for that was, it escapes me just now. So with the switch over to NuGet client assemblies, the way that the internals of a package are reported within the NuGet client is different. And what we missed was that when we are reporting outdated packages, we didn't have all the information that was available regarding that package in terms of what versions available, what versions installed, etc. And as a result, packages were not correctly being reported as outdated into Chocolatey Central Management. It didn't stop anything within Chocolatey Central Management from working, but Chocolatey Central Management didn't have the most up-to-date information about what was outdated within an environment. So that's been fixed in this release. So I'm happy that that one has gone out the door as well, because otherwise environments out there would have been showing as everything was up to date when actually it wasn't. And we didn't release a new version of Chocolatey GUI license extension because there were no knock-on effects to Chocolatey GUI license extension. But in this release, there were updates to the 4 core Chocolatey products. I think that's everything I've got.
Awesome. That was a lot of words, Gary, a lot of talking.
There was.
But thanks for taking us through all of that. You could stop sharing your screen there if you want and preserve your bandwidth, and switch your camera on so everybody can see you again, and make sure you're still there.
I'm still here.
Okay, so we're going to kind of wrap up now. Hopefully that covers everything that you were expecting today. So thanks to Gary for being my co-host again today and taking us through those demos and taking us through the release notes as well. Gary, do you want to say anything else before we wrap up?
I don't think so.
No. And you've just frozen.
Still out there. Oh, I have.
Yeah, no, you're back.
I was going to say there are still a couple of known issues that are out there. I alluded to one earlier with regard to at least one command being slower than it was in 1.4.0. We are actively looking into that, and there will be information about that coming out in due time.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Gary. Okay, thanks to you for watching us today. Please follow us on Twitch and subscribe with the bell on YouTube, and you'll get those notifications when we next stream. Please also join us on Discord. Follow us on Twitter, Mastodon, LinkedIn, and Facebook, all the things. And as I mentioned at the beginning, you can find those links at the bottom of our homepage, chocolatey.org. As I mentioned earlier, our next community coffee break is on the 20th of July at 4 p.m. UTC, and our next product spotlight live stream is on the 3rd of August at 4 p.m. UTC. So we hope to see you then. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.